Hello, dragonflies! Welcome to the Gilmore Gals podcast, where we take a deep dive into each episode of the beloved show.
We're your hosts, Sarah
and Ani.
We're huge Gilmore Girls fans, and we're besties. In this podcast, we talk about everything Gilmore, from the pop culture references to the tiniest minutia only a true Gilmore nerd would care about.
Copper boom! Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Ani. Long time no talk.
I know, right? I haven't heard from you since February. Just kidding. So, okay, to all our listeners, we have no excuses other than life got in the way, and it's been really busy. Sarah, what have you been up to? Let's catch people up a little.
Well, my mom had been sick, found out she has rare skin cancer, but she is getting the best care ever at University of Michigan Hospital.
Woo-woo.
Shout out to them. They're doing amazing, and the cancer is like shrinking to the point that it could actually be gone in a few months, knock on wood. We don't know.
That's so amazing. And I think a big part of it is her good attitude about it all.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, I have been working on getting certified as a personal trainer. Got that done. And that took up a lot of time. And I feel like some other stuff happened in there, but I can't remember what.
There was some travel, because I went back. I was in Michigan for a month when all this started with my mom. And then we got to hang out and go to Disney in June.
Did a few trips to California here and there.
Yep.
So it's been crazy, but we hope to be back on track and releasing an episode or a pod, I guess, every 2 weeks. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. Well, why don't we jump on in? Where are we today?
Okay, so today we are going to be discussing Season 1, Episode 12, Double Date. It is written by Amy Sherman Palladino and directed by Lev L. Spiro.
Quick synopsis. This episode first aired on January 18th, 2001. Holy crap. Lane begs Rory to have a double date with Dean and Dean's loser friend. And this... Sorry, I can't. This leads to some trouble when they are caught by a frantic Mrs. Kim. And also we meet Jackson's cousin Rune for the first time when he, uninvited, shows up at Jackson's doorstep. This leads to an extremely awkward and terrible double date with Jackson and Sookie and Lorelai and Rune. And we get our first real hint at a possible Luke-Lorelai romance.
Oh, I love that scene.
Me too.
Well, for our fast facts, there wasn't really a whole lot to report on today, so we thought we'd just take a quick dip into the origins and meaning of the name Rune, because it's not a name that you hear very often. Mm-hmm. And so according to BehindTheName.com, Rune is Scandinavian. It is derived from an Old Norse word meaning secret. It is a masculine name, but it does have a feminine derivative, Runa.
It's fascinating because normally when you think of runes, well, of course, I think of Harry Potter, but
yeah, I know, me too.
Yeah. But aside from that, yes, exactly. But aside from that, normally rune, I would think of like as a language, like written language, but it means secret. So I wonder if, I don't know much about like old Scandinavian like history or anything, but I wonder if only some people learned to read. And so it was like a special thing.
Oh, maybe.
I don't know. I should ask Ryan. He would know.
Yeah, you should. I was going to say, I'm sure Ryan knows more than I do.
Probably. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just dive into our recap. And this episode opens a little bit differently than most of them do.
We see Rory and Lorelai getting ready for school and work, respectively, in what is presumably a non-Luke's morning, because they usually go to Luke's for breakfast. The song playing in the background is called Earn Enough for Us by XTC. XTC is a band that is mentioned in the show at least twice that I can remember.
Yeah, I think it was like in just a couple episodes ago, like Lane had just gotten or something. Yeah.
I learned about that band in high school, probably because of the show. And I looked them up and they have this one song called Dear God. Have you heard it?
No, I'd never even heard of this band.
Oh, I highly recommend you guys all check out that song, Dear God. It is, it's not for the faint of heart, but it's good.
Mm-hmm. Well, this particular morning routine includes gigantic tureens of coffee and what I believe is the first of many strawberry Pop-Tart appearances. Now, Ani, I don't know about you, but to this day, I freaking love Pop-Tarts.
Love them.
My favorite thing to do is toast the s'mores flavored Pop-Tart and then spread peanut butter in between them and make a sandwich. It's so good.
Oh my, first of all, the first thing I think of is like, that's like 1,000 calories.
Yeah, well, I don't eat it often.
Yeah, but it sounds amazing. So they recently have come out with a bunch of new flavors. I don't know if you people know this, but like we just bought Boston cream pie. Hello.
Oh.
And like before that, there was like banana bread flavor.
Oh.
Holy crap, Sarah. Let me just tell you. Did you guys you watched the Pop-Tart movie, right?
Yes,
It was
yes.
so good.
That was great.
It was so funny. Oh, and starring Melissa McCarthy.
Yes.
She's lovely.
In case anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, we're talking about the movie Frosted or Unfrosted.
Unfrosted?
Unfrosted. It's on Netflix. It's a Jerry Seinfeld film, and it is kind of like a farcical telling of the origin of the Pop-Tart.
Yeah, it was so funny. I loved it. So yeah, like that recipe you just told us about, I'd never heard of anyone doing that, but yes, I do love them. Specifically, I think my favorite ones of all time are just the boring strawberry ones with the frosting on top.
Can't go wrong with a classic.
No, right? It's good as long as it's toasted. But you know what, though? There are some Pop-Tarts that have no frosting. I don't get it. Why would one do such a thing?
I have no idea. I mean, I feel like the frosting is one of the best parts about it.
It adds a ton of calories, but it's just
Chef's kiss.
Mwah. Yeah. Mwah. All right. So moving on. After the opening credits, we open with Lane and Rory going through Lane's latest stash of old tech alert contraband CDs.
The compact disc.
From the 20th century.
Rory begins to read aloud some of Lane's finds, which include two bands that we'd never heard of before, Kraftwerk and Young Marble Giants. So we did a brief search on them, and here's what we found. Kraftwerk is a 70s German pop band. They still tour and actually recently performed a series of shows at the Walt Disney Concert Hall here in Los Angeles back in May.
Wow.
I had no idea.
Yeah, right?
And then Young Marble Giants were a Welsh post-punk band that released only one studio album in 1980 called Colossal Youth. They also later recorded a couple of EPs, and it does not appear that they tour together anymore.
So like Kraftwerk, if they were from the 70s, they've got to be like 100 years old. They're still touring?
The Rolling Stones are still touring. They're in Los Angeles right now.
That does shock me. Yes, that is very odd. Anyway, so Rory also discovers Yoko Ono, and Lane defends her choice by saying that Yoko is a very misunderstood artist and the Beatles would have broken up anyway.
Now, Ani, you and I both love the Beatles.
Yes.
And Lane is probably right. They were growing apart artistically. But have you heard any of Yoko's music? Now, to be fair, I haven't heard much, but what I have heard is it's not my type. There's a lot of like moaning and like, yeah, like
I've never heard any of her music, but now I'm very curious. So as Rory puts on one of the new CDs, Lane begins to shyly bring up Dean's friend Todd, loser Todd. Turns out Lane has a huge crush on him and tries to convince Rory to set them up on a double date, Sunday preferably.
And while this is going on, Lorelai has entered the room a couple of times complaining about the music as she's trying to study. This time she asks the girls who's singing, and Rory tells her it's Claudine Lange.
Lorelai says, "The chick who shot the skier?" And Rory goes, sure, why not? And I love how Alexis delivers that line. She's so funny.
Yeah, so I have a note here that I meant to do a deep dive on the whole chick who shot the skier, and I apparently forgot. So my apologies. We don't have any fun information about Claudine Lange.
But if anyone wants to share with us on our socials, that would be great.
Yes.
Claudine Lange. I doubt that she's the actual person who shot the skier, but now I'm wondering, like, who shot a skier? Why? What's going on there?
Okay.
Okay. In the next scene, Lorelai is at work trying to study.
In his characteristic snarky manner, Michelle informs her that the inn is overbooked with people who are from a town where, quote, high rubber fishing boots and spittoons would be considered formal wear.
Such Parisian snootiness.
Seriously, he's in the wrong profession. I don't know what he's doing.
He hates people. Why is he?
I know. Why are you working front desk at a hotel?
Maybe he wasn't that way before he started working front desk, and then it just happened
Maybe.
due to experience. So Lorelai walks into the kitchen and chats with Sookie, and shortly after that, Jackson enters.
He and Sookie proceed to have the most awkward conversation ever, where it's clear that they're both really nervous around each other.
When Jackson leaves, Lorelai goes, "Okay, who walked in on who naked?" Sookie says, she asked him out weeks ago, but they never settled on anything.
And so Lorelai says that she should just suggest a definite plan rather than sitting around waiting to see if he's going to make that move first. But Sookie says, "I want to be the girl."
Lorelai responds, "You are the girl. That's why we're having this very confusing conversation."
So Lorelai encourages Sookie to get on the phone with Jackson right away and to make an official plan. So she calls and leaves him a super adorable message while trying to twirl her hair with a wooden spoon. Did you notice
Yes.
that? And my favorite quote of the message is, "It's not an emergency, so don't freak out or anything."
Why is that your favorite quote?
I just thought it was funny because she's just like, "Oh, it's Sookie. It's not an emergency. Like, why would it be an emergency? Like,
A vegetable emergency?
yeah." And a side note, as an introvert who always feels extremely awkward on the phone, I can relate to Sookie.
Sure.
Like anytime I have to leave a message, I'm very, very rambly.
Oh yeah. No, I hate calling on the phone. It's the worst. One of my emails that I send out, like my signature line says text preferred, and then I put my phone number.
Brilliant. In the next scene, we see Rory waiting for Dean outside his school at the end of the day. Turns out she had a half day, so she just wanted to surprise him. Yeah.
Oh. We are treated to a lovely display of Alexis Bledell's awkward kissing. She's the worst. A skill that does not improve with age. She's also a super awkward hugger. Does anyone else feel me on this?
Oh, yeah, no, 100%.
I will point out these things every time I see them, and you are welcome.
So Rory informs Dean that Lane is interested in his friend Todd and that she wants to set up a double date for the four of them.
Dean says he's not sure he sees them together, and spoiler alert, it turns out he's right.
Now, I'm not a fan of Dean, and honey, I forget where you stand on Dean.
So demure about my opinion.
But I actually felt kind of bad for Dean in this conversation. Like, he's very gently trying to let Rory down. Like, I don't know if it's a good idea. And then Rory just starts firing guilt shots at him. Like, Lane is great. She's my best friend. Todd would be so lucky to get someone like her.
Yeah, seriously. I did feel for him in this moment. So he eventually caves, agreeing to talk to Todd about the double date.
And back at the Independence Inn, Sookie excitedly bounds into the room, announcing that Jackson called her back.
And she suggested a swanky place called Chez Fleur, which means Fleur's place. And he said he would love to, but his cousin is staying with him for the week.
So rather than postpone till the next week, Sookie suggests that they make it a double date with Jackson's cousin Rune and Lorelai.
So to say that Lorelai is not thrilled with the situation is an understatement, but she's such a good friend, and Sookie says she'll pay for the dinner, so she agrees to do it.
Have you ever been on a double date? I don't think we've ever talked about this before.
Yes, it was super awkward and uncomfortable because for the other couple, it was a blind date. So, yeah, I was trying to set them up, and it was a catastrophe. And yeah, it's never a good idea.
No.
Well, I mean, you and I and, Mikey and Ryan, obviously, but we're already friends.
Yeah. Well, it's date night for the Gilmore Girls, and Sookie's over at Lorelai's getting ready, and she's clearly very nervous and comes up with all these reasons why this going on this date is just a huge mistake.
What if tonight is a total disaster and then he won't sell to me anymore?
How do you know he's not being polite? I cornered him, he felt trapped, and he had to say yes.
Oh my God, technically, I'm his employer. I'm a sexual harasser.
To which Lorelai responds, well, then you need some false eyelashes.
You know what this reminds me of? This is totally apropos of nothing, but we were just watching the new Little Mermaid movie that came out, the live action.
I just watched it recently too.
Yeah, we were watching it with Zoe again. And first of all, Melissa McCarthy, best thing about that movie.
Oh my God.
So and yeah. And so, that scene in the original cartoon version where Ursula's looking in her crystal ball and she goes, "The little tramp." Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Well, they took that out of this version, the new version. And
yes.
Ryan said to me, he's like, "Do you remember what she says in the cartoon version?" And so I just thought of that because she's like, "You need some false eyelashes," because she's trampy. See, she's a sexual harasser.
There you go.
So Sookie goes, This isn't funny. I am now desperate, lonely, and a criminal.
Lorelai tells Sookie to just knock it off because she has exhausted all of her talking right by being crazy. And she gives Sookie some comforting advice, and Sookie begins to calm down. Lorelai is able to talk Sookie down off a ledge like you are to me.
I didn't know that I have that power.
Oh, yes, yes.
Aw, okay. Well, I'm glad. Next, we see the teenagers getting ready for their double date, and Rory asks what lie she told to Mrs. Kim to be able to go out that night.
Lane tells her that she told Mrs. Kim she would be spending the night at Rory's, and as is Lane's way, the lie was so well thought out that she even had an answer if Mrs. Kim called, since no one would be home. Now, my question is, should we be worried at how much and how easily Lane lies? I understand why she does it, but how does she not become pathological?
Well, here's my take on that. Having two Asian girls as my best friends growing up, I can tell you that they learned to lie at an early age. And it doesn't mean anything about their character necessarily. They were very good girls. They didn't get into trouble. They got good grades, just like Lane does. But they had to lie when their parents were being impossible and irrational, like Mrs. Kim is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm saying this as a daughter of immigrants, so there's no shade here, but you can't raise your children here and expect them not to adopt some American cultural norms and values. Like, for example, dating when you're 16. That's a normal thing to do here. It's not insane.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, we learned that Rory hasn't told Lorelai about the double date because she's worried that Lorelai wouldn't want to keep a secret from another mother, meaning Mrs. Kim.
To remedy that dilemma, Lane invents another lie. Lane, Rory, and Dean were going to the movies and just happened to see a friend of Dean's and, not wanting to be rude, invited him to join them.
Rory looks at Lane with awe and says, "To hell with governor, you run directly for president."
Oh, sore subject.
Oh, yeah.
Lorelai is impatiently waiting for Sookie at the bottom of the stairs, and the girls let Lorelai know that they're off to see a movie. And she replies, "Nothing dirty, violent, or French, please."
Sookie finally comes down and she gets a bit of a staircase moment, like in those 90s teen comedies, she's like walking down the stairs.
Oh,
I mean, it wasn't in like slow-mo or anything, but I don't know, just seeing her come down the stairs just made me think about, like She's All That and all those other 90s movies that did
That's
that.
the one I thought of too. I always wanted to have stairs, especially like curving ones, so my daughter could have that, prom dress moment.
No.
Lorelai asks why she didn't bring her coat down, and Sookie replays the events of her coat getting stuck, almost choking her. So Lorelai gets her a wrap to wear. And can I just say, I love Melissa McCarthy, but oh my God, Sookie's now wearing red, salmon pink, and navy blue together. What the hell kind of nightmare outfit is this?
Doesn't she say later on, like, this dress is stupid? Like,
She says it's too tight. But
Oh,
I'm like,
okay.
that's not the problem. You look fine, but the colors, my God.
And just as a side note, Sookie's updo in this episode is how my grandma wore her hair for years. She would go get her hair done every Saturday, just like that. And then she would not wash it the rest of the week, and it would stay. It would stay like that the whole week.
That's amazing. And I think it looks so pretty. And we hear that same kind of idea from Emily later on at some point, that she goes once a week to get her hair set. And I'm like, okay, do you people not ever exercise? Like, doesn't it get dirty? Don't you have to wash it occasionally? That's so weird.
Maybe it's like a, rich people thing. And, if you don't have to, if you're retired and you don't have to, or yeah, maybe they don't exercise. I don't know.
Because she mentions playing tennis sometimes, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's
the
what I was
club.
gonna say. Like my grandma, she would still be out working in the garden with it and stuff. So I don't know, but I mean, I'm pretty sure her hairdresser used like a whole can of hairspray
Back
every
in the
week.
day. That's awesome. So Lorelai answers the door, and we meet Rune, played by Max Perlich.
Now, before we go any further, can we just take a second and discuss the totally adorable reaction to Sookie and Jackson seeing each other?
Aww.
First, he's very clearly smitten when he sees her. And then they end up in this adorable little round of, "Hi," which gets more and more awkward each time. And then finally, it seems like it's over, and there's a second of silence, and Sookie just can't help herself. She pipes in again.
She's so cute.
Her face in that scene is so amazing.
She is the best. So let's unpack Rune. So he sees Lorelai, and with a look of utter disgust, he says very audibly to Jackson, can I talk to you a minute? And they step out into the porch and still completely in earshot.
And Rune says, "Did you see how tall she is? She's like a basketball player." And I mean, she's not even that tall, right?
Mm-mm.
Though, I mean, to me, anyone over 5'7" is tall.
Well, so technically she is 5'9", which incidentally is my height. And no, we're not tall enough to play basketball. We're just a little over the average height for women. He's just a runt with little man syndrome.
Rune continues his complaining, saying, "I can't believe you set me up with that. What, was the bearded lady busy tonight or something?" I'm like, that?
Yeah, she's an objectively beautiful woman. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So Jackson finally fights back, and he's angry that Rune just showed up in town out of the blue, and that he's crashing on Jackson's couch and eating all his food, and he just expects Jackson to go along with it.
So Rune finally begrudgingly agrees to go forward with the double date. As they leave the house for dinner, Rune gives Lorelai a long, disgusted look. Sookie owes Lorelai much more than dinner.
She does. I don't think I would be so kind about the whole thing. Like, I'd still go, but I wouldn't be very civil. Like, she's super friendly and polite to him, and I'm like, why?
Through the whole evening. I don't know how she...
I don't know how she does it. Well, things don't improve for them at the restaurant. And while everyone else is looking over the menu, Rune is just glaring at Lorelai and blurts out, "What size shoe do you wear?" Who does that? What the hell does that mean? By the way, my feet are even bigger than hers, but oh my gosh.
And then we get to experience what going out to dinner with a chef, with a neurotic chef and an also neurotic produce farmer would be like, with Sookie musing over how fresh the fresh mussels are, and Jackson pondering over the source of their carrots. Lorelai is a saint.
She really is. So Lorelai amazingly tries to start some sort of conversation with Rune. I don't get why, who looks terrified that she's even talking to him. I don't know if it's terrified or just like grossed out. I don't know what that look is on his face. She asks him about the name Rune because, you know, it's unusual and where it comes from. And Rune replies, "I'm from out of town. I thought Jackson told you." So on top of being a jerk, he's an idiot.
Yeah. And then the poor waiter approaches and is immediately bombarded by questions by Jackson, Sookie, and Rune about the menu. And Rune asking if there's anything other than French food at the French restaurant. And Lorelai just says, "I'll have a martini and keep them coming."
You know what I just realized in thinking about the waiter? His face looks familiar. Did you recognize him?
He didn't look familiar to me, but I don't know.
I feel like he's in another episode somewhere. I'll keep my eyes peeled for that one.
All right. Well, back in the hollow, the kids are in line waiting for the movie. And we hear Lane going on and on about how much she loves all these bands and musicians. And she doesn't even get a grunt of recognition from the doofus standing next to her. And then did you notice that they're not like in line with Rory and Dean? They're like people behind. What the heck? I don't know.
I bet you it had something to do with camera angles.
Probably.
So Lane asks him what kind of music he likes because, you know, music is her life. It's like the most important thing to her. And he just goes, "Whatever." Oh my God. What a doofus. What is it with Lane and choosing losers? Him and then what's his face that she ends up marrying? I can't.
Zach.
Zach. I think it's because she didn't have a proper father figure in her life, personally. With the exception of Dave Rogowski, her taste in men is no bueno.
Well, she finally gets him to say something by asking about his future major, which we find out is gym.
He's not going to be a member of Mensa anytime soon.
No. Back at the restaurant, the awkward dinner continues, and as we see Rune chopping the heads off of the butter swans.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, he's got a butter knife, and he's just like chopping their heads off.
Oh my God, that's so funny. I got to watch that again.
Poor Sookie is putting all her attention on Lorelai because she's just so nervous she can't even bring herself to make small talk with Jackson.
Lorelai finally takes her aside with the excuse of going to powder their noses, which gets a mutter from Rune, "And gonna need a lot of powder." What the hell's wrong with you? So once they're out of earshot, Lorelai tells Sookie, "No matter how many beers you buy me tonight, I'm not the one going home with you. So I would concentrate on the one who might."
Sookie says she just can't think of anything to say to Jackson. On top of that, her hair is too tight and the place is too fancy.
So Lorelai suggests that she take Sookie's hair down and they just pack it up and go to Luke's where there will be less pressure.
Brilliant idea.
Brilliant. So now we're back at the movies. And again, Rory and Dean are not with Lane and Todd.
And Lane decides for some reason that the middle of a movie in a theater filled with people is the perfect time to try and strike up another conversation. And we find out that Todd's favorite movie is Beethoven. The beloved Saint Bernard. I used to love that movie. Do you remember that?
I did. I watched it a lot as a kid.
Lorelai's group then walks into Luke's diner, and we see Rune sniffing, and then he just goes, "Ew."
So, like, he's a fancy guy who doesn't go to diners. Seriously?
Right?
Oh my God.
He
So
doesn't like French restaurants. He doesn't like diners. What does he want?
ugh, I don't know what to tell you. Oh my God. So Lorelai goes over to Luke while the others sit down and she gets a cup of coffee and she stays with Luke for a little bit.
She points out her date, Rune, and tells Luke that he's even less thrilled with the matchup than she is because apparently she's too tall. And Luke says having a tall girlfriend is great because she can get all the stuff from the top shelf.
This is accurate. Rune jumps up and starts whining that he hasn't had a fun evening and he doesn't want to eat there and he wants to go bowling with Jackson.
Jackson takes a beat and contemplates going simply because he can't tell whether Sookie is having a good time or not. And it takes her a second, but Sookie's finally able to make a clear request and says, "Don't go, stay here. We haven't even really started our date yet."
I was like proud of her there for, speaking up.
Yeah.
So Jackson looks relieved and happy and he tells Rune he's on his own. And as he leaves, Lorelai cries out, "Bye, Loon."
Lorelai decides to continue hanging out with Luke so that Sookie and Jackson can have some privacy. And she watches them, longing for the whole first date, beginning of that relationship glow. Everything's new and exciting. It's a good feeling. I miss that, she says.
And Luke tells her, "You'll have it again." And then he goes, after a beat, he goes, "Maybe sometime we could." But then he gets cut off by a raging Mrs. Kim, who storms in, demanding to know where the girls are.
Lane had told her mom that she was with Rory and Lorelai, which is clearly not accurate. So Lorelai just explains, well, they were going to a movie with Dean.
To which Mrs. Kim replies, aghast, "A boy? You let them go with a boy?" Like he's a swamp monster. And she says, "Just because you let your daughter run around with boys doesn't mean I let mine." Excuse me, what are you implying about my daughter? Thank you very much.
Seriously.
The movie's over, and Lane is clearly ready for the date to be over. And Todd seems to have perked up, though, and he wants to go get ice cream, and seems like he's into her, and he's disappointed that Lane wants to go home. And then the moms come marching up the street.
Mrs. Kim is verbally assaulting Lane in Korean from all the way down the street, yells at her to go home. Lorelai's approach is a bit more subtle, but you can tell that she's displeased that Rory didn't give her the full story about their plans.
As Lorelai and Rory begin their walk home, you hear Todd proclaim, "That's Rory's mom? She's a babe." Which is nice after a whole evening of feeling ugly.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So Rory acknowledges that she lied and it was wrong and she feels bad. And then explains that she lied to Lorelai so that Lorelai wouldn't have to lie to Mrs. Kim.
To which Lorelai replies, "Oh my God, you really are my daughter."
You can tell that Lorelai is upset, but not furious when she says, "I have to know where you are at all times, especially when you have my shoes on."
Rory asks if Lorelai would have lied to Mrs. Kim if Rory had told her the truth, and she says, "No way, that lady's scary." And then she goes on to compare Mrs. Kim to Robert Duvall's character, Bull Meacham, in the movie The Great Santini, and says they share a striking resemblance.
So I wasn't familiar with this movie. Were you?
No.
Okay, so I just looked it up real quick. Apparently, that character is known for a zealously strict and even abusive parenting style. I feel like that's a little rough to compare Mrs. Kim to.
A little, yeah.
Incidentally, Robert Duvall, who is fantastic, was nominated for both an Oscar and a Golden Globe for that role, if anyone's interested in watching it.
Next, we see Rory climbing a tree to visit Lane outside her upstairs window because she has been predictably grounded.
As an aside, there's no way Rory would know how to climb a tree.
Why? Why do you
Because she and Lorelai are very anti-nature. There's no way that child ever went outside and climbed a tree. There's no way. Although, Lorelai does mention shimming down a tree to get out of her parents' house. So maybe there's that.
And Lane says the words convent and Siberia were both used several times and at least once as a combo. But she's grateful for the double date because it helped her realize that Todd is a gigantic loser. Though we then find out that Todd actually liked Lane. He even called her house, but Lane pretended to be Mrs. Kim to avoid talking to him.
Oh my gosh. What do you think changed it for him? Because he seemed pretty disinterested.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that was it. Like he could tell she was disinterested. And so then he's like, "Oh, well, now I like her."
Oh,
I don't know.
Okay. So next we see Lorelai entering Kim's Antiques, wanting to apologize to Mrs. Kim and make sure that she still feels comfortable sending Lane to her house.
Mrs. Kim says that Lane will be staying home because she lied and must be punished. And Lorelai tries to explain that her own parents tried to lock her up and throw away the key, and it really didn't work out. And she says maybe if she had someone to listen to her, things would have turned out differently.
In the end, both moms agree that all they really want is for their daughters to be safe. So it ends on a good note.
Yeah. And then Lorelai knocks over something and has to pay for it.
Yeah, right.
Well, in the final scene, Rory and Lorelai are at Luke's, and Rory gets a page from Lane.
Page.
On her beeper. She takes Lorelai's phone to make the call outside because Luke hates cell phones, as we all know, and she does not want to incur his wrath. Very smart.
Rory calls Lane, who is standing in her yard. Yay! She can go as far as the Kim's Antique sign, and she's very happy about it.
I love that scene. And then she goes a little bit in front of the sign or and then she kind of jumps back oh.
Dude, we walked around there. That's so
we did.
Weird.
Mm-hmm. Lorelai mentions to Luke that she had a good time chatting with him the other night, and he seems like he's going to work up the courage to finally ask her out, but he chickens out like a big fat chicken.
He totally does. You can tell because What's-Her-Face is such a good actress. She's anticipating the ask out, like she was almost holding her breath for it. And when it doesn't come, she actually seems disappointed. Did you think so?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then he says maybe they can hang out like that again sometime, playing poker. And Lorelai just says that she would like that. Then she longingly watches him walk away.
With a little smile.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Double Date.
Join us next time as we discuss Season 1, Episode 13, Concert Interrupt Us.
Copper boom!
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and share with your friends.
If you have any questions or comments, if you feel like we left anything out or got anything wrong, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at the Gilmore Gals Pod. And we also have a Facebook page.
Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes.
Copper boom!